Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. And it's Elena back in the hot seat for the Financial Planner Live. And I'm really excited to be joined by Leigh Dunkley, who is the Financial Wellbeing Lead at Schroders Personal Wealth. So how are you this afternoon, Leigh?
Hi, Elena. I'm really good, thank you. Really good. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you very much for taking time out of your afternoon to come and join me. I've been really excited to have you on. So, as I mentioned, obviously you're the financial wellbeing lead, but just to begin with, how did you get to that point? What's been your career journey to date?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. It's been really, really varied. And I'm one of these odd people where if you say, how did you get into financial services? I'll say, I've always wanted to work in financial services. And it stemmed very much from a child and probably from the roots of how I grew up. And I grew up kind of with my mum and with my dad. But as I was going through my teenage years, my parents, their relationship broke down. They went through divorce and separation. So actually, as I grew up, I really saw actually how money and finances had an impact on both my mum and my dad separately, but also as us as that family unit. And I always remember my dad's, words of wisdom to me where he was like, go to university, go and work for a bank and get in the pension scheme. So I went to university. I studied at Aston University in Birmingham. I did international business and French. And that allowed me to I went to Paris for a year and actually spent 6 months working for HSBC and 6 months working for BNP Paribas, which was amazing. And came back, applied to be on the Lloyds Bank graduate program, which I did. So did that successfully and worked through my career with Lloyds. And then I absolutely on day one got into that pension scheme, and there was no rhyme or reason as to why I did it back then. And it was only through my time at Lloyds and the different roles that I've had that you really then start to get that appreciation as to, that was absolutely the right thing for my dad to be telling me. And I now have an appreciation, as a millennial, as to what changes and how things like that little piece of advice or that little, do this, those can really have a real big impact on your future and your personal circumstances as well. So I worked for Lloyds Bank for around 7 years.
Oh, wow.
So I did 2 years within the commercial bank, so supporting businesses around the UK with their business banking. And I then took the decision to move across, and I actually worked for nearly 5 years under their Scottish Widows brand. And so this was in the world of workplace pensions. And it was a new area for me, but it was one that I was really intrigued about because especially a brand like Scottish Widows, we've all seen the adverts on TV, and you've all get put into your workplace pension scheme. But actually, what does it mean? What is happening in this part of the business? So really joined, and that was one of my first real roles within the area of business development as well. And my role throughout that 5 years was to genuinely go and speak to businesses, speak to HR directors, the pension managers, wellbeing managers, and talk to them about actually what support were they putting in place for their employees from a pensions perspective. And more importantly, how are we engaging with different demographics, with different people in different roles, different divisions across these organizations to say, actually, this is a really great benefit that your employer is putting in place. Do you even understand it? Do you understand what it is? Do you understand what's going into it? Do you understand how you can maximize it? All of these different, questions that many people have around the UK, but actually just don't have the confidence to stand up and ask, or don't know where to turn to ask. So that was a big part of my role for 5 years. And it was whilst I was at Scottish Widows that they put me through my level 4 qualifications myself. So I'm a qualified financial advisor by trade. And then it was around, just over 2 years ago now, that Lloyds Bank announced the joint venture with Schroders PLC and the company of Schroders Personal Wealth, or SPW for short, was born. So they announced that a couple of years ago now, and I moved across and joined back in October 2019 to really help set up the business development team, but ultimately create and lead the financial wellbeing strategy within that.
Oh, so you've had a busy, career to date so far, and lots of future prospects ahead of you. But I think in the podcast, obviously, we talk so much about financial planning, the importance of financial planning, all the different elements of it. Obviously, you're the financial wellbeing lead. So, what's the difference between financial wellbeing from financial planning?
Absolutely. And they come very, very hand in hand. So for me, when I'm out there talking about financial well-being, I quite often will ask people, let's do it now. What does financial well-being mean to you?
Oh, that's such a good question.
I guess
it's to me being financially stable, being able to pay my bills, my rent, while having, money left over to save, while money, I guess. And for me, I like to go out for nice meals. I like to buy clothes. So financial well-being, I guess, to me is, having that extra expenditure to do the things that I enjoy. But I guess overall, the same way that we talk about physical well-being and mental well-being, I guess for me, financial well-being is being in a position where I'm not stressing about these things, I guess.
Absolutely. And your answer there was actually really good, because you had the two parts of it. So the first part, and quite often the part that people initially answer with, is actually, do you know what? I want a little bit more money. Like, if I had more money, I could buy more things, I could do more experience, I could live more comfortably. So actually, let's climb that career ladder. Let's build my wealth and have more money. And they talk, around the pounds and the pence. Whereas your answer was probably, the second part of it was more where we come from, is that confidence and that knowledge, and that, removing the stress and the pressure. And actually, when we speak to people, like, yes, more money will absolutely allow you to buy more things and do more things. The research shows that actually, just because you have more money, that doesn't necessarily equate to that feeling of financial well-being. Mm-hmm. So when we're talking to people about financial well-being, it's absolutely that. It's about providing education. It's about deepening understanding. It's about giving people the confidence for them to understand where their finances are, what they're doing, ultimately make tangible decisions that are going to put them in a better financial position. But ultimately, and I think more importantly, is empowering them to do that. Because actually, there's a lot of people around the UK that, we see our finances, they're extremely personal. We don't want to talk to anybody about them. We see them as, extremely complex, and that's everything from kind of day-to-day household management through to some of the complexities around pension schemes and retirement planning. So for me, that financial well-being is getting people to start to talk about their finances. Financial planning is a way to unlock that and do that. So the first thing for me is actually people need to understand where they are on their own journey, and ultimately what they want to achieve and where they want to get to. And then financial planning, financial planners, financial advisors, they are the ones with the toolkit, with the expertise that can help get that person from A to B and do it in the right way.
So do you find then, so you do workshops in offices, workshops online? How do you conduct these sort of financial wellbeing workshops?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've kind of got 3 tiers to what we do at SPW, kind of from a financial wellbeing perspective. So the first one is absolutely all around financial education. Yeah. And for me, financial education is, there will be people in every organization that do not want to speak to anybody. And that's absolutely fine. Not everybody is ready to start that conversation, especially around finances. But actually, if they are signposted to credible resources, they're quite happy to go in there, look at the topics, the themes, the areas that are of interest to them, start to read, whether it's read an article, listen to a podcast, but start to build up those financial foundations themselves. So that's really important to me and us at SPW. So we have what we call our wealth lens. And this is where we house all of our educational materials and content. And that is on such a broad range of subjects, everything from how to get on the property ladder for the first time through to, retirement planning or, inheritance tax planning and everything in between. So it's making those resources accessible to people. And I think more importantly, making it accessible for free, because it seems really silly to me that we try and put financial barriers in place for people to achieve financial well-being and unlock financial education. I think as a society and as an industry, we need to just stop doing that. If we've got the experts and they're creating this content, we need to be pushing it far and wide and getting people to start accessing and engaging with it. That's the first kind of level. The second bit is then what we call financial guidance. And that's absolutely right, what you said. It's those interactive sessions. It's getting people who actually might have those more generic questions, who want to come along to, a seminar or a webinar and understand some more of those basics and ask those questions that they've got. It's giving them the platform and, that circle of trust to be able to do it. And we do it in a number of ways. So we can absolutely, with some of the employers and organisations we work with, we can go to their key sites, their key offices. We can do it in person. We can do it quite informally, whether it's a staff room, the canteen, whether we do it in a conference centre. However, really that employer and ultimately their employees want to facilitate this conversation. Obviously, across the last 18, 24 months, we've seen the absolute rise of doing this digitally and virtually via Teams and Zoom and Google Hangouts and the rest of it. And I was very skeptical at first. And I think it's become because we've come from such an in-person, face-to-face world that when the pandemic hit, you're like, oh my God, how are we good? We've made so many great strides to start to engage people on this journey. Like, is this going to set us back? Is this going to hurt people's financial well-being because we're not going to be able to reach them, as easily or engage them in the right way? But I've been very, very pleasantly surprised by actually how many people attend these workshops and webinars online, how many questions and the level of interaction we get from them. And yeah, the amount of actually employers and organisations that are wanting us to come back and rerun the series or tweak it and do something different next year. But I guess the one thing from doing it online is you make it a lot more accessible and inclusive for everybody, because, if a business has, an office where there's, only 2, 5, 10 people, historically, it's, would it make sense for you to go and sit there and engage face to face? Maybe, maybe not. But ultimately, when we're in this digital world, I think it's about having something that is accessible for everybody is absolutely kind of my takeaway. And then the final layer, that third layer is then obviously is financial planning, is financial advice. So at Schroders Personal Wealth, we'll actually offer anybody within the UK, regardless of kind of level of wealth or money in the bank account, if they want or feel like they need to speak to a financial advisor, we will offer them that free, no obligation initial consultation. It's half an hour for them to speak to a qualified professional. They can ask any questions they've got. There is no such thing as a silly question when it comes to our finances. And they can start to talk around, their personal circumstances in a confidential environment. What are they looking to achieve? And then our advisors, can quite quickly signpost, answer those questions, provide some great guidance. And ultimately, if financial advice is going to add value to that individual, then we can look to support them in that area as well.
Oh, excellent. It sounds like a very multi-leveled system that allows you to access sort of, I imagine, a very large population. As we spoke about previously, and you just said then, money does definitely feel like a very taboo subject. People don't want to speak about it, the same way that even when you're having a bad day and you're stressed about one thing or another, you normally feel quite open and confident to speak about it. May that would be with friends or work colleagues or, managers in your business. But when it comes to finances, it really does become something very personal. People very often keep their cards close to their chest. So do you find when you're running these workshops, at whatever level they are, especially probably before you get to, meeting a financial advisor, that you are really educating people, that you are telling them things that they haven't heard before?
Yeah, and that's really the crux of it, because I think, it's quite easy, particularly, working within this industry. I've been in a very, very fortunate position where I've grown up and, my parents had, they were fairly educated, they knew about things like pensions and debt management and basic budgeting and, instill some of that as children, and then working for large institutions. But equally, at the same time, it's very easy to stereotype and bucket people. And I think, particularly in certain roles. So when we were looking at designing actually the education and the guidance and the advice proposition that we take out there to other employers and organizations. You know, it's like, well, which business do we want to launch it with first? And my answer was Schroders Personal Wealth. And they were like, Leigh, we're a financial advice business. Like, this is crazy. Like, these guys know what they're doing. And I was like, yes, half of our population, half of our employees are qualified financial advisors, you're right. But half of them aren't. Half of them work in HR or finance or marketing or IT and tech and all the different support functions that are absolutely crucial to our business. But because our name is Schroders Personal Wealth, you bucket the entire organization and population into this world of, oh no, they should absolutely know what they're doing with their finances. So it's, you know, it's how do we get away from that? And, you know, some of the, you know, different industries and things that you work with, actually, you know, the old stereotypes of, you know, the chef never comes home and cooks for himself, and the joiner's always got stuff that's going around the house. But we've got to acknowledge that, you know, especially in certain professions and fields, like when we're speaking out there, speaking to like lawyers and accountants, they are so time poor, like they are such highly skilled and highly educated people in their fields. But actually, it's then some of the basics around looking after your own finances and looking after your own broader well-being, whether it's mental, physical, financial. Those are the things that often get deprioritized and missed. So the more that we can start to bring those conversations together and normalize those conversations, the absolute better. And I think that's really, really key in terms of the link between our finances and our mental health. So we did some research last year. We published our first, our inaugural Money and Mind report, and we should be releasing the next one hopefully early in the new year. And we can compare, where people were pre-COVID to now where they are post-COVID. But the findings in that were absolutely crazy. So we found that 48% of people, UK adults, felt regularly stressed about their finances.
Wow, that's nearly half.
Exactly that. And if we think about the mental health statistics that we all know, it's the 1 in 4. So when we're overlaying these themes of, you know, our finances, that figure is becoming 1 in 2. And, you know, when we talk about our finances, people are talking about anxiety, depression, panic, fear, overwhelmed. And it's having a real impact on our mental health and wider areas of our lives. So we need to really combat that. So even though nearly half of us are feeling this level of stress, only 3% of us have ever shared those worries with our employer. Now, again, to me, that is crazy because our place of work is where we accrue our wealth. It's where we, you know, earn our salaries. We might get bonuses, commissions, our workplace pension, protection benefits, all of these things that make up our remuneration package. So surely our employer would be the first port of call if we were feeling, you know, stress or anxiety or nervousness or had a challenge or a question around our finances. But it just isn't. And it does come back to the fact that it is the last taboo. Now, I have absolute faith that we will, as an industry and a society, crack this, because if we think about 5 to 10 years ago, mental health was not a thing.
Yeah.
Nobody would have signed off sick because, you know, nobody would have even been able to ring up their boss and go, do you know what, I'm just having a really shitty day. I just need some me time. I'm not going to be productive today. There's things going on in my life. I just need to take a personal day. And that the fact that conversation has been normalized is absolutely fantastic. Now, don't get me wrong, there is absolutely so much more we need to be doing around, you know, getting rid of the stigma around mental health and stuff. But it does give me a lot of faith that we will get there kind of with the other pillars of well-being as well. And I think financial is probably the last one we do need to crack.
Yeah. And it's interesting how we talk about financial well-being as a pillar in comparison to like mental well-being and physical well-being, because the same way that like I joined a gym 3 months ago because I'm conscious about my physical well-being, I thought, you know, I'm getting to that point where I want to be a bit fitter, I'm going to go to the gym. Or the same time that if I have I'm feeling a bit anxious one day, I know the things that help relieve that. So I go, well, I might book myself on for a yoga class this afternoon. Or we've recently been, a lot of us in the office with our employee benefits, been going to Reiki sessions or stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it's very crazy when you think that, oh, I'm worried about money, instead of actually approaching someone, you just bury your head in the sand. It doesn't feel like there's something that you can do to actively tackle that.
It's having that toolkit, right? So like you said, if we know that, if, you know, whether it's our mental health or physical health, if we know we're not in the best place that day or week or month, we've got that toolkit that we can reach inside of and go, I know these things usually make me feel better, so let's give them a go and let's see if we can turn this around ourselves. And our finances, we need to get to a place where we've got that same toolkit, whether it is, you know, reaching out to a professional or a support line and just having a conversation. Actually, whether it's getting out our physical financial plan and going, right, I know where my money is. I know I've got everything I need. Sometimes I think a lot of it with our finances is that reassurance, because if we think about the times when that anxiety and nervousness creeps in around our finances, it's usually when we're going through life events. So whether it's, you know, new relationships, starting a family, growing a family, buying a first house, a second home, a holiday home, downsizing home, looking to plan for retirement, you know, buying a new car, whether it's some of the, even the more negative and stressful times of our life, like relationship breakdowns, the loss of a loved one, it naturally is those kind of turning points in our lives that create that nervousness, because it's the unknown. There's going to be an impact on our finances in some way. And actually the message that we want to get across to people is that's okay. Because actually, if you've got your financial plan, if you know what you've got and you know where it is and you know your incoming and your outgoings and where your money is saved, then when these life events happen, we can just pick up that plan. And whether it's by yourself or whether it's with a professional, we can say, right, well, the impact of this life event is going to be X. Therefore, we tweak this and we pivot that and we might change that. And the plan makes sense again, because we've got to make our money enable our lives. And this is what we talk about when we talk about financial well-being is, you know, we use the acronym ROCKET at Schroders Personal Wealth a lot. And we use the acronym ROCKET because we say that, you know, everybody has somewhere they want to get to. Everybody has a dream, a goal, a plan, something they want to achieve, and they want to get from A to B. And money is just fuel for your rocket. And that's the word we say, but actually money shouldn't be the thing that controls our lives. Money should be the things that enables our lives. So we've got to be able to just have that confidence that we know what our money is doing and where it is, and that is really the start point. And when we speak to people that have like a lot of this nervousness and anxiety around their finances, it's generally about going back to those basics. Yeah. It's literally about saying, right, where are we now? Where is this baseline? Do we actually know how much money is coming into us as a household, as a family unit, as an individual person? And do we know categorically how much money is going out and where it's going? And 9 times out of 10 people have no idea. So it's going back to those real basics and creating that toolkit that people can just get out and say, right, I am a little bit worried about this, but let's get that roadmap out and let's get back on track.
And I can imagine, as you said, you know, the rocket analogy there, it's about enabling you, not controlling you.
Absolutely.
I can imagine for lots of people having these, because other people might see them as very basic, but as you said, it's the last taboo. Lots of people aren't educated on this. I can imagine for lots of people coming out of these sessions, it really is an emotional relief. It's not, it's a weight off your shoulders to have this level of knowledge that then you can take moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely it is. And we always put it into that context against the other pillars of well-being, because like you said, we've got very, very used to and comfortable as a society to say, right, you know, if I'm feeling a bit lethargic or I've not had a great night's sleep, like, let's get out there, let's go for a run, let's get those 10,000 steps in, let's go and do a couple of hours at the gym, or, you know, spend a couple of hours making batch cooking for the week of healthy meals that I know are going to be nutritious. But we invest a lot of our time and energy into those things because we know it's going to make us feel better. And quite often it is, a couple of hours each and every day that we are investing in our own well-being, which is fantastic. When it comes to financial well-being, actually, all we need is a couple of hours each year, to build that financial plan, to do a review of the finances, to do that, to update our budgets or check our pensions, see how it's going. That's not something we need to be doing every day. It's not something we need to be doing every week. So actually, we need to start prioritizing our financial well-being in the same way that we are prioritizing our mental health, physical health, social health, all of the other pillars of well-being that we know. And it's just about getting it to that same level of importance.
So for anyone in the audience listening to this and they resonate with it, that maybe they're a bit anxious about money issues or one thing or another, what are those first baby steps that you should take?
Absolutely. I'll tell you what, I'll canter through my 6 top tips, and this features in the first webinar that we normally do. And it's the Introduction to Financial Wellbeing webinar. So our 6 top tips are, number 1 is, and this is the acronym, so R is review household expenses. Absolutely number 1, because they are the expenses that you set up, you leave to run in the background. Before you know it, the introductory offer, the deal that you signed up to for 12 months has run out, and we're now paying double, if not triple, the amount in money as we are for the exact same service. So top tip number 1 is, when you are setting up any initial household bill, whether it's energy providers, insurances, Netflix, internet, mobile phone contracts, mark it in the diary 6 weeks before that initial offer is due to end, and then negotiate. Look on the comparison sites, find another provider, find a better deal, or negotiate with that existing provider. If the price has to go up, well, where's the enhanced service to match it? Or if the service is going to stay the same, actually, as a loyal customer, how can we make that price reflect that service? So getting a lot more savvy with that, because you'll be amazed how many just $4.99 here, $6.99 there, you can save by just making sure we're on top of this stuff. And again, once a year, once every 2 years. The O then is organized finances. We've said it a couple of times. It's that income and expenditure. It's knowing what's coming in. It's knowing what's going out. Write it down. There's some great, spreadsheets, toolkits, budget planners online where you can physically go and it'll give you the layout, but physically looking at what's coming in, what's going out, and use your current account for that. So some of the big banks have got quite good and savvy at showcasing actually that annual summary and starting to bucket and categorize some of your spending patterns for you. So it's then really easy to just pick that out and dump it in. But the most important thing about doing that exercise is understanding, actually, have you got more coming in than going out, which is a fantastic position to be in. But then it starts to prompt the next questions of, well, if I do have that bit of disposable income, whether it's at the end of every month or every year, what are we doing with it? Because at the moment, we're living in a world of historically low interest rates. We know that inflation is remaining at 2, 3. There's predictions of it even going up to nearly 5%. So actually, is our money best held in our current accounts, or should we be looking at things like other investments, whether it's ISAs, topping up pensions, whatever that might be, to look at some future longer term growth? So it's starting to have those conversations. If you are on the other side and you actually identify, oops, like I'm spending more than's coming in, which, isn't as uncommon as you might think. It's not a cause for panic stations. But again, this exercise is about understanding which one it is, because if you do have more going out than's coming in, we can start to again look at that and address that and rebalance those scales. So actually it might come back to, do we need to review our household bills and trim down some of that expenditure? Or actually, do we need to speak to, a debt management specialist, look at consolidating some of those loans? But whatever avenue it is, it's again, that understanding of where we are and then what support is out there afterwards. And C then is that create a plan. This is the most exciting one for me. This is drawing that timeline. This is starting from where we are now and draw that timeline as far into the future until you are no longer on this earth, and start to physically plot out what you want to achieve in this life. And people are, what do you mean? What do I want to achieve? It's like, well, we're not just working. We weren't put on this earth to work. What comes at the end of it? Start to plot it in. And it's stuff we've already touched on, key milestones, key life events, but ultimately, when do we want to retire? And what do we want that retirement to look like? Because we're all living longer. None of us want to work longer. So ultimately, children born today are going to potentially have 30 to 40 years of retirement that they need to fund.
Wow.
So what do they want to be doing in that retirement? Because there's a cost analysis here. It costs a lot. There's a kind of a very big disparity between someone that wants to retire mortgage free and potter around the garden for the next 20, 30 years and seeing friends and family, versus someone that maybe got onto the property ladder a bit later, might still have an outstanding mortgage, but actually wants to travel the world and wants to take 5 years out and go on that round the world cruise or whatever it looks like. But until we start to think about what our future looks like, we can't start to say, well, actually, how much is that going to cost us? Because then until we know how much that's going to cost us, we can say, right, well, based on what we've got now and what we're saving now, are those dreams, goals, hopes, are they even realistic? Or do I need to be doing something now to enable those goals to become reality in the future? So that's number 3. 4 then is the K. So once you've got your plan, you need to keep it on track. Once you've got those goals, there's no point just putting that plan in a drawer and saying, okay, we'll see you in 50 years. Thank you very much. Goodbye. We need to be working towards them. And this is where I start to talk to people around that longer term financial planning. So thinking about things like their pensions. So actually, if you were listening to one of my webinars and it was your 20th birthday today, you would have 564 monthly paydays until your 67th birthday, which is the age most people would want to retire.
Mm-hmm.
So you would have 564 monthly paydays to make a difference, to start saving a little bit more into your pension, putting it into savings, doing whatever. But it's a great amount of time. Now, obviously, the graph then shows that if you're kind of a little bit older, you're around 40 years old and on the call, you haven't got as many monthly paydays left. It comes down to around 204. But the message is that it's never too early to start planning for later life, and it is never too late. So no matter where you are on this spectrum, let's just start thinking about it, talking about it, and looking at actually what do we want to achieve. And then we can keep going, keep that plan on track, keep topping up our pensions, saving into ISAs, whatever it is, whatever the goal is, we can, put a plan in place to get there. The E then is the one that we've all heard of, know and love, which is expect emergencies. This is that cash buffer fund. This is the thing that everybody says you need to have in place, and none of us do. And it is, and that's the point of some of these sessions, is actually, we all know this stuff deep down. We've all been told it. We just need a good reminder to start doing it. And that buffer fund, that emergency fund, is absolutely that. It's that when the boiler breaks, the car needs new tires, the kids need new school uniforms. It's having that money set aside so that if something happens, and let's face it, these are all events that at some point are going to happen to most of us. We just don't know when. Mm-hmm. So it's having that money set aside so when they eventually do happen, we don't feel that stress, that anxiety, that nervousness, that panic of, oh my God, what do I do? Do I need to dip into other savings? Do I need to take out a loan? Do I need to go to a payday lender and put myself in a financially vulnerable position? Whereas in actual fact, if we just had that small pot of money set aside, it would alleviate a lot of that stress. And again, it's about getting people into just those good behavioural patterns of every month. And it doesn't have to be loads, whether it's 10, 20, 50, £100 a month, whatever people can afford. It's getting into that habit of physically saving. That's the most important part. Mm-hmm. And then the T, the final one, obviously it would be very remiss of us as a financial advice firm to not have take financial advice as that final top tip, because, I think people generally have, don't understand the full value, I think, that financial planning can have. And it's whether it's, they don't feel like their situation's complex enough, or they don't feel like they're wealthy enough, or they don't feel like they deserve to speak to a financial planner. There's lots of myths that are out there surrounding this industry. So we want to dispel as many of those as possible and truly make more advice more accessible to more people around the UK, because it's only through having these conversations that we're genuinely going to make a difference to people's lives. So that's my 6 top tips from webinar number 1.
They are great. I think anyone that, even I'm going to take note of a lot of that. I think if you're listening in our audience now, there's some brilliant tips to start thinking about your finances if you're in a situation where you've got your head buried sort of slightly in the sand in that sense. And I saw your statistic that you posted on LinkedIn that 27% of employees say that their money worries impact their performance at work. So how can embedding an effective wellbeing strategy then help like your overall performance at work? So why is it a useful thing to employers to be thinking about also?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a conversation we have with employers all the time, because actually not just financial well-being, but that broader well-being strategy, it's about looking after our people, right? If our people are at work and they're stressed or they're anxious and they're not focused and they're not being as productive as they could be, they're not performing at the level that they could. So actually by putting in place these tangible support mechanisms and solutions, hopefully you can give them that confidence, you can reduce that stress, we can reduce presenteeism within a business so that hopefully people can then thrive and they can bring their whole selves to work and they can genuinely perform at their best. So I truly, truly believe that as employers, having that focus on well-being and financial well-being, because our finances do underpin absolutely everything that we do in this world, you know, whether we like it or not. So having that lens and having that real strategy around supporting people with their finances has to be crucial. And I think not just for your own employees within the business, but from an attraction and a retention point of view. Like, we know that especially for the millennials and Gen Zs and people coming through the world now, base salary is not everything they are looking for. And actually, I think it was a recent statistic I read from Glassdoor that said 86% of millennials would rather take a pay cut and move to another organisation whose culture and values align better to their own. And the culture and values piece for me, it's not just what we're writing on our corporate websites and we're instilling in our induction handbooks, it's how we live and breathe it. And to me, that is our wellbeing strategy, and it is the support we put in place for our employees and the development opportunities that we have in place for them as well. And I think, you know, having that real well-rounded strategy for employee wellbeing can absolutely help employers. And, you know, let's face it, if we've got happier, you know, more productive employees, that's got to have a positive income on the bottom line commercials of any business.
Definitely. And I think when you start talking about financial well-being and money worries, I think some business owners might slightly get their backs up, because obviously it's all about salaries and how much you're paying staff and things like that. But it goes to show that ultimately having these systems in place actually help you not only attract the best talent moving forward, but retain it. And then on the flip side, you know, make people more productive, perform better. So overall, it's only going to be a massive benefit to the business. And when I joined Recruit UK, the culture was something that was so important to me. And it's not just about what you do, it's where you do it and who you do it with. So the employee benefit schemes that we have in place, as much as they're not my salary, they benefit you in loads of different ways that they're just as crucial, so be it one way or another. And I think, especially as you mentioned, for the new generations that are now, you know, entering the world of work, it's things that for them are really important. So it's things for businesses to take note of if they want to attract the hottest talent moving forward and keep it in their business.
It absolutely is. It absolutely is. And I have this conversation quite often, you know, with individuals, but also with my friends and family that are, you know, potentially looking at other job roles or other companies to work for, and they're like, oh yeah, but the salary is like it's £5,000 or £10,000 more a year. And I'm like, okay, but what's the pension benefit? Like, actually, what does that look like in terms of how much you contribute and how much the employer is going to contribute on your behalf? Like, are there any protection benefits in place, or actually would you potentially be giving up, your life insurance and your critical illness cover, yes, for a slightly higher salary, but you've got to almost work out that bigger picture to say, by losing out on some of these other benefits, actually even that increase in base salary wouldn't justify it. I'd be coming out, worse off. And I think for me, that conversation, particularly around protection, is one we need to be having more and more in the UK. And, I talk to so many younger generations in particular, and you say to them, like, how many of you own one of these? Yep. How many of you have insurance on this in case
Everyone.
you lose it or it's stolen, or absolutely everybody? And it's like, how many of you insure this? You are your single biggest asset. And the scariest statistic I read recently was, it was 42% of people that have a mortgage have no form of life insurance in place.
Wow.
Yeah, that's nearly half of the population. And I know it's not a conversation that we want to have, and it's that unexpected. It's the worst case scenario, right? It's if the worst thing was to ever happen to us and we were no longer here, or actually we were just unable to work for a prolonged period of time. Like, what have we thought about what would happen, to our financial position, to our, to paying the mortgage, paying the rent, paying off our long-term debts? Who would pick that up? And I think a lot of people were still in this mindset of, oh, the state will come in, the state will look after me, and things like that. And you see some absolute horror stories, especially working in this industry, of people that they go through the worst times of their life, and because they haven't put in place that robust financial plan, it's just their finances become another area of stress and anxiety, and like we said, it starts to control them, rather, in what is already a stressful and emotional time. And it's part of the role and the world that we live in, that it's, as we said before, like, it's never too early to start that conversation, but it absolutely can be too late. Like, there's sometimes there's nothing we can physically do to help, because the worst has happened, and you just never want to see someone in that position.
Yeah. And your point then, it's never too early, but it can be too late. I guess from these financial well-being workshops that you do, I presume you can correct me if I'm wrong, you're breaking down those initial barriers. You're proving, as you said, there's no such thing as a silly question. And from this podcast, I've spoken to lots of different people, and generally through Recruit UK, that you do find people worried to seek financial advice. May that be they're worried about asking a silly question, they're worried about being drowned in technical jargon and not knowing what's happening and feeling silly, they don't feel like people represent them. May that be women not wanting to approach men, or may that be people from ethnic minorities feeling like they're not being represented. But I presume the financial wellbeing workshops allow to break those initial barriers down, to allow people to feel more confident to seek the financial advice from a financial planner, which they might actually need.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's exactly it. And as an industry, especially the financial institutions, we do have a reputation for being pale, male and stale, and it is, there's no way of getting around that. There's so much we can do, there's so much that is being done, and it's I'm so proud to be able to sit here and represent a fantastic financial advisory and planning firm as a young woman, recently turned 30 myself, and be able to kind of be the change, and see the change that is needed out there, and have an influence about how we do that. And I think you touched on a couple of things there. I think the jargon, oh my God, it's insane. And one of the sessions that we run on saving and investing for the future, one of the questions we pose to people is, we're going to tell you what the difference is between an ISA, a LISA and a JISA. Because it's 3 acronyms that it's like, everybody's heard of an ISA, but how many people could actually tell you what an ISA is? Like, what it even stands for. So it is absolutely about breaking down those barriers, talking to people in plain English around what these things mean. And especially when you get into the world of investments, and we're talking about equities and gilts and derivatives and yields and it's an absolute minefield, and it's no wonder that people just switch off. Like, as an industry, we've got to make it easy for people to engage with us, and we've got to make it inclusive and accessible for everybody. We just have to, because it's, we talk about things like, we've still got the gender pay gap, protection gap, investment gap. These are all things that as a society, we can absolutely influence and change and bridge those gaps and bridge those inequalities. We've just got to do it together, and we've got to be looking, internally, whether it's the government policies, whether it's financial institutions, whether it's employers themselves, and the policies and support they can provide. We've all got a part to play in that. We really do.
Yeah. So what is the future of financial wellbeing then? I know you said earlier on, it never can be too early. We're still, as an industry, trying to crack down on this final pillar of wellbeing. But do you think this is something that needs to be trickled down to school education level?
Well, for me, we are literally just at the tip of the iceberg. There is so much we can be doing. The ideal for me is that, you would have every single employer across the UK would have a robust financial wellbeing strategy in place that was accessible to every single person. There was something for everybody in that organisation, and it would be absolutely linked to the other pillars of wellbeing and not just looked at in isolation, which I think is one of the issues we've got at the moment. We absolutely need to be taking this into schools. The fact that our money and finances are not a core part of our curriculum at the moment is genuinely worrying and a little bit insane. I mean, one of the things we recently did this year and last year was we were working with a university up in Scotland, and we actually worked with the students themselves and delivered a series of podcasts where it was kind of like talking about finances, and we did kind of various stages in terms of looking at leaving university and entering the world of work for the first time, and what questions do they have around pay slips and tax and pensions and things like that. And that for us again is just the start. You'd want there to be, maybe not even on the curriculum, but at least that support system, somewhere where people can reach out to, at university level. And then taking that further down, absolutely, at primary school and secondary school, it should be part of what we're taught. And we don't have to get into things like what is a pension, what is an investment, but it's about those behavioural patterns, and getting children into good habits. Like, how many children get £5 a week pocket money? Right, well, are we having the conversation around, well, actually, did you want to spend £4 and put £1 in, in this little piggy bank here, and we'll save it up. And actually, if you leave that £1 in that piggy bank for a couple of weeks, I'll give you £1.50 back. So actually, in teaching them kind of some of the concepts of actually saving in the first place and putting money aside, but actually, if we do save, hopefully our money will grow and we'll get a little bit back extra in return. But also getting children to think more around, well, what is the point of that money? So actually, do you want to have that money every week and just go down the local shop and spend it on those sweets? Or actually, is there something bigger that you want to save for? And therefore, if we take that money every week for 5 weeks, rather than just buying those little sweets every time, we could buy something bigger that you genuinely want and is genuinely going to add value to your life. So again, that bit of like goal setting and getting them into that mindset. So I think there's definitely ways that we can be doing it and just engaging with younger people around this kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I think to unlock this final taboo, as we talk about it, it's about not having a stigma from an early age. Like, I find it in many ways, I'm, crazy, some of the things that you do learn in school, which seem to never crop up in your life again. However, things like saving or just simple budgeting on what is a mortgage and things like that are so crucial to understand from that low level, as you said, is behavioral patterns. And as much as, you know, we talk about mental health, and it's definitely a much more open, honest conversation that we're having now. And even I've seen books in shops where it's like mindfulness for children, and it's ways to incorporate these behavioral patterns, you know, from a young age, so you carry them with you as you grow up. There is definitely a space for us to be doing that with that financial well-being pillar as well.
Absolutely. No, could not agree more. And it's, you know, you see it, you know, we see that actually how we engage with things as a children, it absolutely comes, our experiences, our background, what we're taught, you know, what we learn from family and friends, it stays with us through our lives. It really, really does. And actually, you know, we see it a lot with the older generation as well at the moment, is, you know, especially kind of we've got this, you know, generation of baby boomers that are, you know, about to, you know, unfortunately leave us, and, you know, we'll be passing on significant amounts of wealth to younger generations. I think it's something like £5.5 trillion worth of money is going to be passed from one generation to another within the next 25 years.
Wow.
Yeah. So for a lot of people around the UK, that is going to be the single biggest lump sum of money that they may potentially ever receive through this form of inheritance. But who is talking about it? So actually, are these people that are going to pass on this wealth, have they told their families, you know, who is in their will, what is in their will, what their express wishes are for this money? Have they thought about whether they're going to have an inheritance tax liability, and who's that going to fall to, and all these other things? So it's, you know, like we've got such a generational divide as well. It kind of feels like we need to start that conversation earlier. We've got a proportion of people at the older end that just, they do not want to talk about money at all. And it's almost our job in the middle here. We need to bring those two together and dispel some of these myths and get people talking.
I like what you just said then, that what you are is ingrained from you growing up is what you carry with you, because ultimately, you know, what your parents were telling you when you're growing up about you need something with a good pension and things like that, I guess has allowed you to blossom to the place you are now, where you're able to share and pass that knowledge on to other people and help them be in meet their financial potential.
Absolutely.
Oh, Leigh, it's been excellent to have you on the Financial Planner Live today. You have been an excellent guest. I'm sure you've taught a lot to our audience. You've taught me a lot, and it'll be definitely something that I'll be taking moving forward. I think this is also an excellent podcast for any business owners out there, any hiring managers, people that resonate with this and feel like they also need to make sure their employees are not just fulfilled in all different elements, but financially as well. And I think it's just been really good to have you on to talk about something that is very often that final taboo as we speak about. And it's been lovely to have you on with us today.